Welcome to Encounter Grace, where we come face to face with God's work in the world for our good. Join host Jason McKnight as we explore practical issues of community, theology, and leadership in everyday life.
Hey, welcome to Encounter Grace. We're glad you're here today. I'm Jason McKnight, and I'm in the studio here with Ben Hendricks and a special guest to be named in a moment. But here we are in the afterglow of Memorial Day, and we wanted to bring to you a story and a friend who is a hero to many of us here at Grace. Memorial Day proper is the holiday here in the United States that honors and mourns those who have given the last full measure of devotion, those who have died in the service of their country, fulfilling their military duties. Well, thankfully, Doug isn't dead yet, but we love you. And, and we have Doug Hampton, who is a hero in these halls at Grace Fellowship and around Eastern North Carolina. You might know him as Kathy's husband, or as a fixer of all things mechanical, or as the keeper of the pool, maybe the master of the Mustang, or even the teller of mostly clean jokes. But really, Doug, you're a hero to us. Welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Jason.
You and Kathy have lived here in Kinston for, probably 30 years now, and been at Grace 25 or 28 years.
Oh, gosh. We moved here in 1982.
Oh, wow.
That's almost, 39 years?
You're making me do a lot of math.
I know. I'm trying to count it on my fingers.
So 82, you moved here to Kinston, but you fought in the Vietnam War. And that's what we want to talk about today, a little bit of that and a little bit more stuff. But what has always astounded me is flying combat helicopters. I mean, you weren't just fighting the war in the Pentagon pushing pencils. Like, you were where it was. Let me just ask you this. What was it like the first time you went into combat?
Well, it was kind of neat in a certain sense. First of all, I was scared to death.
Yeah.
But I was flying with a very seasoned pilot. He'd been there like almost 10 months out of a 12-month tour. And this was a big operation. I didn't know much about it. I was just doing what I was told. And we took off with 10 helicopters, our company, in a formation. And as we approached the landing zone, well, first we went to an area and picked up the troops. And each one of us carried about 7 fully loaded soldiers. As we go into the area that the operation was taking place in, ahead of us I could see Air Force jets. It was like a John Wayne movie.
Wow.
These Air Force jets were coming in, dropping napalm in the wood line. And then behind them, our gunships were coming in, strafing the wood line. And then we're coming in behind them in a trail formation. And our door gunners are shooting like crazy. So it was really it was scary but exhilarating too.
Right.
Wow, this is really happening. So we dropped off troops and then we left, and that was the first. That kind of got me through that first excitement. And then we did several more lifts, bringing more troops in. And then during the day, as needed, we would go back into those hot areas and pick up soldiers that had been wounded or even killed. But the wounded ones, we try to get to a field hospital where they might save their lives. So
like where Hawkeye and BJ were.
Right, exactly. So it was, it was scary, it was exhilarating, but it was very rewarding too. Being a part of that.
What a cool first operation, just to be able to be a part of. I mean, I say that humbly sitting here, but Doug, I'm just curious, like, what, just as a helicopter pilot, like that helicopter, man, that's life and death right there. Like, can you kind of walk us through some of the details on that? Like, what does a normal crew look like? What's the payload for a flight? How often did you guys go? And what in the world is a Jesus nut?
Well, as I just indicated, we had 2 pilots. We had 2 door gunners. One of them would be our crew chief.
Yeah.
And we could take up to 7 fully loaded combat troops. Most of our missions initially were you'd fly to and from about 1,000, 2,000 feet. As the war was just to chase a rabbit, as the war went on, and they started coming up what we thought was heat-seeking missiles and all. A lot of the operations dropped down on treetop. Wow. But it was pretty exciting. We'd fly, I'd say if we could get 1 day a month off, that was good. And 2 days was just, wow, that was wonderful. But we were either flying or on standby.
Okay.
I personally flew almost 1,200 combat hours that year, so we were busy.
Wow.
We kept going,
said how many hours? 1,200?
1,200.
And
Just shy.
Yeah,
Just shy, yeah. Just shy.
I think you can round up. It's okay. So, it's just I guess here's a question that I'm just as curious in as well. Like how did you navigate just on those missions the danger of just flying in combat? I mean, all the time, just that being right there in front of you, not knowing what's coming. Like, how did you navigate that? Just
Well, just from a pure term, using the word navigation, they had a few what we call non-directional beacons out there. It was nothing very sophisticated like we have today.
Yeah.
But primarily, you just got to know the area. Flew with the guys who were experienced, and you got to know the area, and that was it. If you got into bad weather and stuff like that, sometimes you might have to land at an outpost or something and wait for the storm to blow by. In fact, when I had first got there, they had just lost a gunship crew that was circling, waiting for a storm to go by, and ran out of fuel.
Oh, no.
And the entire crew was lost. And
Man.
but it was you had to plan ahead, and a lot of the trips were formation of 10 helicopters. You just follow the guy ahead of you.
Okay.
I hope he knew where he was going. But we did an awful lot of single ship missions too, and you just got to know where you were going.
Yeah.
Landmarks and all that stuff. And if you had a non-directional beacon, you'd follow your little compass to it.
Yep. That's crazy. Well, let's back up a little bit and learn a little bit more of who you are. Where did you grow up, and where did you go to college, and what did you think you'd be doing with your life?
Well, my dad was in the Air Force. I was born in New York in a little village called Cambridge. But we moved all the time. We lived in 7 different states, and I went to, I think, 10 different schools before I graduated from high school.
Wow.
So it was
just kept getting expelled?
Yeah, that's what it was. That's right.
No, you kept moving. Okay.
And then I ended up going to the University of Maryland, where my dad had retired.
Nice.
And I always wanted to fly.
Yeah, you did.
When we were kids, I remember we being on these Air Force bases, and we'd watch these guys fly off back then, the old F-86 jets and all that sort of thing. And, it was just something I always just wanted to do.
And so were you drafted, or did you enlist? Or did you
I enlisted, but I had dropped out of college. I was kind of floating, and
okay.
I dropped out of college to kind of get some direction. And my dad had approached me and said, why don't you look into the Army helicopter program? And I did, and applied for it. Got an orientation ride in old helicopter. It was called the H-21 Banana. And it's just like the Chinook. I think most people are familiar with the Chinooks with the big rotor blades on each end.
Yep.
But this had got its designation, and it was similar to that. It was a predecessor, I guess, to the Chinooks. But the tail end, it would come to a point and V off, and it looked like a banana, and thus the flying banana. H-21. It was a bucket of bolts. It just rattled and everything else, but it was fun. So, and anyways, went to basic training and direct to flight school from there.
Nice.
All right. So when in all of that mess, the real question is, when did you meet Kathy?
We met at university 1965. And that, I guess it was June or July of 65 that I went in the Army.
Okay.
So we had kind of a long-distance relationship. And then in June of 66, we got married.
June of 66, all right.
And so in a few weeks, it'll be 55 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I met her at a bar in College Park where all the students went there. She said she'd never been in a bar before, but
I could see her saying that.
But I remember I looked at when our eyes locked. I said to my best friend, "I'm going to marry her."
Wow.
And I did. Yeah, it's been good.
Wow, 55 years.
Yeah.
How many? Like, she has to have at least 2 medals for putting up with you that long. Doug, for those of us, so I wasn't born until 73, so I'm just a young punk. But we look back and we hear about the 60s. And, maybe when I was in college, Tom Cruise's movie Born on the 4th of July and, all that other stuff. And I'm Canadian, so draft dodgers, coming up north of the border and all that kind of stuff. Kent State and Rice. I mean, that's looking back. What was it like for you living in the 60s as a college student and as someone in the Army and serving? And just how did you, like, did that touch you? Did you know that was going on, or how did you feel?
Well, when I got out of the Army, I went back to college to finish.
Yep.
And we had one baby, we had one coming. Things were tight. I had a couple part-time jobs, and then trying to get through school too. And I was blessed. I didn't have any trouble. They had some protests on campus, but nothing violent. I was blocked from going to one class. And the professor didn't even go, so it didn't matter anyway.
Right.
So it was uneventful for me. But I've heard some friends and other people they had terrible times readjusting and coming back to society. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, like even before you came back, just so your time in Vietnam, like how did that shape your view of just America? Of I mean, like thankfulness, like what was the lens you kind of just saw things through after that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of controversy about Vietnam, but we were.
Yeah.
I've always been patriotic. When I hear the national anthem today, I tear up. It's just. But back then we were young, and stereotype we were going to save the world from communism, and I think we were all a little bit crazy. I think that was a requirement to be a helicopter pilot or a crew member.
Right.
And but we got to Vietnam, and when you're getting shot at every day, and you start medevacing people out or bringing body parts out, or dead fellas, and you start maturing real quick.
Yeah.
And the value of life suddenly becomes very clear, and it kind of keeps you, in reality. All of a sudden you're not the Top Gun you thought you might have been.
Right.
Man.
So that, but I just never wavered in my love for this country. It's just always been there. I probably started because my dad was in the service. And
that's true.
So then I'm curious, like, because being Memorial Day and then kind of all this time up into the 4th of July, we have a couple really healthy, good few weeks of patriotism when we're all thinking about it, kind of getting ready for the 4th. How, as someone who's served, who's spent their time, who's seen the things that you've seen, you've like sacrificed, put the time and all that stuff. Like, how do you define America? Like, what's the essence of it? Like, how do you see it? That's great. What a question.
I like what Condoleezza Rice had said about the essence of America. And she said it's not religion, it's not ethnicity. She said it's an idea. She says it's an idea that no matter what your upbringing was, how humble it might have been, you can do great things. Yeah. And I agree. I think that's the essence of America. But but as far as
I think she's right.
Memorial Day, for years now, Kathy and I get up early every morning, and we'll go to every monument here in Kinston. Yeah, it kind of chokes me up a little bit. Bear with me. Yeah. But we go and we read every name on those monuments: World War I, World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam, and we meditate on that and think about it. And I'll come to attention and salute each monument as we leave. And then, of course, I lost a lot of friends over there and classmates, and we meditate on that too. They recently had the Vietnam Moving Memorial Wall down in New Bern. And when you see something like that, and they got 58,000 plus names on that thing, it's just, if that doesn't grab your heart, there's something wrong.
That's right.
But it's just a time where we personally as a family just try to honor those people that have passed on ahead of us. And I wrote this down. There was a fellow, he was a former, I think he was a Navy helicopter crewman, member of some type. His name was McCree Thornton, and I'll read this so I don't blow it. But I like this. He said, "For those who have fought for it, freedom has a flavor the protected will never know."
That's true.
So,
man, that's true.
Gets to me, I like that.
Freedom has a flavor that the protected will never know. For those who fought for it, that's very well said. a few years ago, 10 years, maybe 8 years, you and Kathy began to show your love for country in maybe a new way for you or a deeper way for you by getting a little more involved politically. And it was very fun. I remember, being at your pool and talking with you about it. And I remember you saying to me, I just want people, meaning those people in D.C., those people in Raleigh, all those, I just want them to hold to the Constitution.
Yeah.
And that was so crystallizing for me. They're just forgetting the Constitution. What is the genius of the Constitution? What's the best thing? Like in this country, again, it is an idea. This country is an idea. And it's not perfect, and nobody's claiming that, but it is an idea with a promise. But the Constitution kind of, what is it about that makes this country work when we hold to it?
Well, of course, the Constitution, it's a framework for our government and our legal system, too.
Yep.
So the greatest thing about the Constitution, I think, or one of the greatest things, is that the writers of it realized it might not be perfect. It might need to be changed. And they came up with this idea of amendments. And, I guess a lot can say about what amendments, but the Constitution allows for that.
Yeah.
And it's had to be used. Amendments to bring equality to everybody.
Yep.
So everybody is, quote, treated the same and equally.
Yep.
So I think that's pretty cool.
Which is the best, I think, argument against this idea that it's a living document and you can make it mean what you want.
Right.
Because that's not what they thought. They made an amendment process because it's a static document.
Right.
It means something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's kind of a fun question. I'm just curious, do you have like a favorite war hero, general, or commander, just from your time in the military or even before? Or?
Well, the person that pops to my mind the most actually was our first company commander when I got to Vietnam. This guy, he was just a man's man. He cared about everybody.
Yeah.
Even the enlisted folks, everybody, they knew he cared for them. And just led by example. And every major combat assault that we had, he'd be in the lead helicopter.
Wow.
It's incredible.
He was one of those guys you say, man, I'd fly through hell with that guy. He was an incredible man. Yeah, leader.
My uncle's in the military for nearly 30 years, I think, and that was one of the things he helped me see about leadership is it's not the guy just giving orders. It's the guy that's up there at the front, like leading with people. And that's just such a cool thing to be able to hear and see. Like what an impactful guy.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
What's his name?
I don't remember.
You don't even remember?
I don't remember. I think that was 50 years ago.
I did not mean to. I was just like, man, I want to make a T-shirt with his name. Doug's commander. All right, I'll leave it at that.
I actually did a search for his name and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can't remember, even the people I met last week. So, all right, I want to kind of switch. I know you probably have 1.5 million funny stories to tell about Vietnam, and we maybe should do that one day. But I'd love to hear the story about Hawaii, how you got to Hawaii.
Oh my goodness.
Because I think this is so great.
Well, when I got to Vietnam, Kathy and I had been married 3 months when I went to Vietnam. And I knew that you got an R&R. It gave you a week R&R from Vietnam. So I told Kathy, maybe we can meet in Hawaii. And once I got there, I was told, no, that'll never happen. There's not very many seats going to Hawaii, and they're taken by the generals and colonels, higher ranks, yeah. So I wrote to Kathy and said, well, it doesn't look good. I don't think we're going to be able to meet. And unbeknownst to me, she wrote to her senator. It was Joe Tidings back there in that time, and she just said, I want to see my husband. He instituted a congressional investigation, which is the last thing any military commander wants.
Right.
And my company commander called me in. He says, get yourself down to the battalion commander's headquarters right now. And I went down there, and he had me standing at attention, and I was shivering and quaking, and he's accusing me of all these things. And I said, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. And he knew I was lying, but he said, your wife has written to the U.S. Senator, and I have a congressional investigation here. I want to know why you're not going to Hawaii to meet her. He says, before you leave my office, you're going to tell me the date you want to leave this country. And I projected out 6 months, and I said, and I was on that airplane going to Hawaii. And shortly after that, they opened it up, and, it wasn't a problem going to Hawaii, but it was just absolutely hilarious. That man to this day doesn't think I told the truth, but I didn't know what he was talking about.
You weren't complaining or anything.
Yeah,
I just love that, but I tell you what, we should let Kathy run the country.
it was wild.
Wow. So, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, you didn't come to Christ until after Vietnam, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. So kind of walk us through that story of coming home and then coming to Christ.
Okay. Well, I have to regress back when I was in flight school. We were, like I said, we were young and thought we were the big dogs. And, we got a weekend off, and we'd go into Fort Worth and, drink some beers and see what mischief we could get into. But we had one fella in our unit that was named, his name was Chuck Davis. And Chuck was a born-again Christian, which meant nothing to me at the time. But Chuck, he was just a nice guy. Whenever we invited him to go drink some beers, he said, no, you guys go ahead. He said, I choose not to. And it was fine. He never shoved his religion down our throat or anything. But by his example, this man never once compromised his values. Well, we graduated from flight school, and most of us went to Vietnam. If we did, we went to units forming up to go to Vietnam. And so I really didn't know what happened to Chuck. And then to move forward faster, we got out of Maryland. I ended up in medical sales in Charlotte. And we were there about 5 years, and one day I opened up the newspaper, the Charlotte Observer, and it said, go to Iran and be a flight instructor with Bell Helicopter. And in 45 days, I remember slamming my hand on the table and telling Kathy, we're going to Iran and get rich. So in 45 days, we sold our house, and we had Kathy and my 2 little girls in Isfahan, Iran. So when we got there, it was the Shah's birthday. Everything was closed down, so they put us in a hotel. And everybody had jet lag anyway, and we were feeling tired. Anyway, I went to the lobby, and I saw a sign down there, because Kathy was going to a Baptist church, and I was going to another denomination. And the sign said, if you want to ride to the Isfahan, First Baptist Church of Isfahan, call this number. So I said to Kathy, why don't you take the girls and go to church? And she said, no, I'm too tired. Well, finally, she said, okay, you call and I'll do it. So I dialed the number, and this guy picks up the phone. He says, hello, this is Chuck Davis. Can I help you?
Wow.
It still gives me chills.
Oh, man.
But because of his witness all those 11, 12 years before, I was able to at least start going to a Bible study. And in that Bible study, I started learning about this relationship with Jesus, to be your Lord and Savior. Anyway, it was through that, his witness all those years ago, that I progressed and in Iran gave my heart to Jesus. Asked him to be my Lord and Savior, and we just often laugh about that.
It's incredible.
Lord God would take me halfway around the world to a Muslim country to meet
bring
Jesus.
You to Christ.
Yeah. So it was pretty wild. Yeah.
And you actually, a couple of years later, you had to leave Iran fast.
Well, we did, and in fact, that's where I saw my very first miracle. Things were breaking down bad. There'd be crowds that walk around your neighborhoods and your house, and it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Sometimes if they could get to your car, they'd push into the street. The crowds would do this and cut your gas line and light your car on fire. Or you might find a note on your windshield that said, if you're not gone in 3 days, we're going to kill your family. It's kind of a psychological warfare. And people were leaving as fast as they could. So finally, I decided I better send Kathy and the girls home. So I took them up to Tehran to put them on a flight. And I went as far as I could with them. And they walked around there's a great big huge plywood wall, and said goodbye. And as I started to leave, I could not move. And I guess I'll stay here. Yeah, I could not move, but I wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't weird or anything. And I waited there, and I looked, well, the plane's taking off, I guess I'll go. And I couldn't move. And probably about an hour and a half after the plane left, all of a sudden around the corner came Kathy and the girls crying. They knew nobody in Tehran. They had probably 15 cents to their name.
Yeah.
and God had planted my feet. And here I go again. And anyway, it turned out her exit visa was fine. They'd screwed up our children's, and they said, you can go, but your children can't go. So she'd been back there among their immigration and customs place, arguing with them, and they're speaking Farsi, and she's speaking English, and getting nowhere. Right. And so anyways, we had to go all the way back to Isfahan, get that straightened out, and then the next time I took them to Tehran, I got them sent home.
Got 'em on there.
But it's just God is so good.
He is. But he just planted your feet there.
I could not move. I stood
to
there.
protect your wife.
Several hours, yeah.
Yeah, man. Doug, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us a little bit, thinking of all of your life, but also back in Vietnam. Here, sort of after Memorial Day, everybody says, I don't know who started it, but the idea that freedom isn't free. And I'm just sobered every time. I remember the first time I walked through Arlington Cemetery, and it's just such a heavy thing. And I, going around to the monuments here, I think that's just a rich thing. But freedom is not ever free. And of course, we all can draw lines straight to the gospel for our own hearts, because our freedom was costly for Jesus. That's Greater love has no man than this. So thank you, Doug, for sharing and helping us see the goodness of the Lord in your life and also in our country.
Well, thank you. And to respond to just what you said, I think about that assurance we have because of Jesus. And I think, well, what are we doing with our lives? And one of my favorite verses is James 2:14. We're paraphrasing, because I'm paraphrasing. It says, if a brother comes to you with a need and you can help them, and all you do basically is pat them on the head and say, I'll pray for you, and send them on your way. What good are you?
Right on.
We should reflect as Christians. How do we deal? What are we doing in response to Jesus' sacrifice?
Yeah, that's great. Doug, thank you for sharing with us. Ben, thank you for helping out and leading us here. And everybody, thanks for joining us. I'm telling you what, there's somebody that needs to hear this. Send this to them. And we'll see you back here the next time on Encounter Grace.
This is a ministry of Grace Fellowship Church in Kinston, North Carolina. Visit gracekinston.org or follow us on Facebook and Instagram.